Free Walk TLV.
Free Walk TLV.
Discover Tel Aviv like a
local.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into the incredible story of Eliezer Ben-Yehuda, lived 1858 to 1922. And, people might know him as a Hebrew author, maybe a scholar, journalist.
Right, but he was really the driving force, wasn't he, behind reviving Hebrew in Eretz Israel?
Exactly, the driving force. And we've looked at quite a few sources about his life, his mission.
Yeah.
And our goal here isn't just like a simple biography. We want to uncover the really surprising bits, the challenges, the personal sacrifices involved in this huge linguistic shift.
Absolutely, because when you think about language revival, you might picture, committees, maybe slow cultural changes.
Right, academic stuff.
Yeah. But Ben-Yehuda, his story is just so intense, so personal, and honestly pretty radical in some ways.
Radical's a good word for it.
It really shows how one person with this unwavering belief can just fundamentally change things, a whole cultural landscape.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then. He was born Eliezer Yitzhak Perlman in Lithuania. But something big happened when he was, around 17? What was that spark?
Well, yeah, that's the pivotal moment. He was 17, and he came across these new ideas about Jewish national revival, back in the ancestral homeland.
Oh.
And for him, it wasn't just like an interesting idea. It hit him hard, like a lightning bolt, almost.
And this wasn't just a passing thought. It led to a complete change in identity.
Instantly. That's what's so striking. He didn't just mull it over. He changed his name to Ben-Yehuda.
Son of Judah.
Exactly. A very conscious choice, dedicating his life right then and there to this cause.
Wow.
And then fast forward a bit, 1881, he actually immigrates to Eretz Israel.
And that's where his commitment really becomes, visible, dramatic even.
Oh, yeah, because he makes this huge declaration.
The Hebrew-only declaration, which sounds simple, but in practice, what was that actually like? Daily life, how did he function?
Well, think about it. He lands and basically says, I'm only speaking Hebrew from now on.
In a place where Hebrew is mostly for prayer, right? Not chatting about the weather.
Precisely. It wasn't the language of the street or the market. So immediately, huge practical problems. Just basic communication.
Yeah.
He'd have constantly been trying to figure out or maybe even invent on the spot the Hebrew words for, everyday things.
Must have required incredible patience.
Yeah.
And probably some funny moments, too.
I imagine so. Lots of pointing, maybe. But the very act, even with all the difficulties, forced the issue. It made Hebrew practical, right there on the ground, for him and for anyone interacting with him.
So, okay, one man making a stand. But how do you scale that up? How did he start making Hebrew viable for, everyone else?
Right, because one person speaking Hebrew isn't a revival. This is where his practical side really comes in. He knew it had to be used daily. And crucially, taught.
Education.
Yes. So he started writing Hebrew textbooks, which was a massive step, right? Making it a language you could learn other subjects in, science, history, whatever.
And it wasn't just textbooks. He used media, too, didn't he? The Hasvi newspaper.
Exactly. The newspaper was vital. It created a space, a public forum, where Hebrew could tackle modern life, current events, politics.
Stuff people actually talked about.
Right. It showed Hebrew wasn't just ancient or holy, it was alive, relevant. It could handle the modern world.
So he's building the tools, the platforms. But what about the language itself? It needed rules, structure, a way to grow, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that led him to establish a really key institution, the Committee of the Hebrew Language.
Which later became something quite significant.
It did. It evolved into what's now the Academy of the Hebrew Language, still around today, obviously.
And its job was?
Well, its job then and now is basically to guide the language.
Yeah.
Standardize grammar, figure out new words for new things, make sure it keeps developing logically. It showed real foresight, planning for the long term.
Okay, so that's the public infrastructure he was building.
Yeah.
But you mentioned his personal commitment was intense. Let's talk about his household. That story is pretty wild.
It really is. It shows just how deep this went for him. He and his first wife, Devorah, they made this incredible decision.
About their son.
Yes, their son, Itamar Ben-Avi. They decided he would be raised as essentially the first modern native Hebrew speaker from birth.
Wow. And not just like speaking Hebrew sometimes?
No. It was total immersion. Absolute. Hebrew only in the house.
To the point where other languages were actually forbidden, even a stray word.
That's the story, yeah. Apparently not a word of Russian or Yiddish or anything else was allowed. He supposedly even trained the family maid to only use Hebrew with the boy.
That's extreme dedication.
It really is. It shows the lengths he'd go to, planting the seed right there in his own family from day one.
Which, logically, leads to the next huge problem. How do you speak only Hebrew about modern life when the words just don't exist yet?
Exactly. That's the core challenge he faced. Hebrew had this incredibly rich history, religious texts, poetry.
But not words for, say, a train or electricity.
Right. All these new things popping up in the late 19th, early 20th century. And this is where Ben-Yehuda becomes a true innovator. He didn't just borrow words or translate directly.
He invented them.
He invented them, but creatively. He'd often dig back into existing Hebrew roots, ancient words, and kind of repurpose them or build upon them to create new terms that felt authentically Hebrew.
Can you give us some examples? Maybe explain a bit about the root system for listeners who aren't familiar. It really helps understand how he did it.
Sure. Take electricity. The word is kashmol. Now that root, chashmoyel, it actually appears way back in the Bible, in Ezekiel.
Really? What did it mean there?
It describes something like a glowing, radiant substance. Amber, maybe. Something full of energy and light.
Ah, okay.
So Ben-Yehuda takes this ancient root with its connotations of energy and applies it to this brand new scientific concept. It's clever, right? It connects the new to the old.
And the root system itself.
Oh, right. So in Hebrew, most words are built on a 3-letter root, sometimes 4. These consonants carry the core meaning. Think of KTV, meaning to write.
Okay.
Then you add different vowels, prefixes, suffixes, and you get related words. Katav, he wrote. Miktav, letter. Ketovet, address. Katava, article. All related to writing.
Got it. So he was using these existing building blocks.
Exactly. He wasn't just pulling things out of thin air. He was working within the language's own structure.
Okay, so that's kashmal for electricity.
Huh.
What about other everyday things, like that train?
Right, the train. He coined lafet. That comes from the root kahar afevi, which means to ride.
So a rekavet is a thing you ride on. Makes
That's
sense.
pretty logical, yeah. Or bicycle.
Yeah.
It's basically a plural form of the word kahwa, which means wheel. So 2 wheels, essentially.
That sounds brilliant.
Isn't it? An elevator is malit, from the root pafit, meaning to go up or ascend. And car became a konet, which is derived from komakona, meaning machine.
So a little machine you drive.
Kind of, yeah. It shows a real thoughtful process, expanding the language organically.
This is just such a monumental amount of work, which I guess all leads up to his magnum opus, right? The dictionary?
Oh, absolutely. The Dictionary of the Hebrew Language, Old and New, the Ben-Yehuda Dictionary. It was colossal. The scale is just mind-boggling.
Give us the stats.
Okay, get this. 17 volumes, about 30,000 root words, over 50,000 individual word entries.
Wow.
It was this massive effort to capture everything, ancient Hebrew, rabbinic Hebrew, medieval, and all the new words he was coining, the whole spectrum.
And it literally consumed his life, didn't it? I read something quite poignant about when he died.
Yes, incredibly poignant. He died in 1922, and the story goes he was actually working on the 8th volume at that very moment.
No way.
Pen in hand, essentially. But the project itself, it outlived him by decades. It wasn't fully completed and published until 1959.
1959.
Yeah.
That just shows the sheer scale of it.
It really does. Decades of work.
Now you'd think someone doing this, pouring their life into reviving a language, would be hailed as a hero by everyone. But that wasn't the case, was it? He faced some serious pushback.
Yeah, significant resistance. Especially from what's called the Old Yishuv. These were the more established, often deeply religious Jewish communities that existed in Palestine before the main waves of Zionist immigration.
And the ultra-Orthodox communities as well.
Yes, particularly them. For many in these groups, Hebrew wasn't just a language. It was Leshon HaKadosh.
The Holy Tongue.
Exactly. The language of the Torah, of prayer. Sacred. And the idea of using it for, haggling at the market or talking about politics or just everyday chatter.
That was seen as wrong.
By some, yes. Deeply wrong. Like a desecration, almost blasphemous. They felt its place was in study and prayer, not the mundane world.
And they didn't just disagree quietly, right? There were real consequences for him.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just academic debate. He faced serious condemnation. Prominent rabbis actually excommunicated him.
Excommunicated. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And religious newspapers denounced him, called him a traitor to tradition, things like that. The pressure was intense.
And didn't this pressure even reach the authorities at the time, the Ottomans?
It did. These religious groups put pressure on the Ottoman rulers, and Ben-Yehuda was actually arrested.
Arrested. On what grounds?
Accusations of sedition, basically, stirring up trouble. It was largely because these factions saw his whole project as undermining the traditional religious order.
And his newspaper.
Hazvi got shut down, too, temporarily. A big blow, obviously, to his efforts to spread Hebrew.
So he's facing poverty, illness later on, social ostracism, religious condemnation, even arrest.
Yeah.
Yet he keeps going, especially with education. Tell us about the Lamel School.
Ah, yes. That was truly groundbreaking. In 1885, the Lamel School in Jerusalem, it became the very first school anywhere to teach all subjects entirely in Hebrew.
Think about that. After nearly 2,000 years.
Exactly. For almost 2 millennia, Hebrew hadn't been the language of daily instruction in a classroom. This was revolutionary. It set the precedent. It proved it could be done, and it paved the way for generations to learn Hebrew not just as a subject, but as the medium for all learning.
It's just so clear he put everything, absolutely everything, into this. And the personal cost. It wasn't an easy life.
Not at all. The sources are clear about that. He lived large parts of his life in real poverty. He struggled with illness constantly, tuberculosis, which is what eventually killed him.
And the personal tragedy, too, losing his first wife, Devorah, to disease.
Yes. A huge personal blow on top of everything else. Financial hardship, sickness, intense opposition, profound personal loss.
Yet somehow, through all of that, the dedication just never broke.
That's the core of it, isn't it? That's what makes the story so powerful. Despite every setback, every obstacle, every personal tragedy, the vision never dimmed. He just kept writing, kept teaching, kept advocating, kept building tirelessly.
So, summing it all up, Eliezer Ben-Yehuda's life is just this incredible story of dedication. Taking a language largely confined to synagogues and ancient texts, and almost single-handedly, through sheer force of will, laying the groundwork for it to become a living, breathing, modern language again.
Yeah, from that first Hebrew-speaking home, which was radical in itself, to facing down excommunication, to literally inventing the words people needed for daily life. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And what strikes me is just the audacity, like you said earlier, the sheer audacity of that vision.
Absolutely. To believe it was possible when so much was stacked against him, and the personal sacrifices, they underscore just how much it meant to him. It wasn't abstract. It was his life's work, his entire being.
So this deep dive leaves us thinking, maybe it's a question for you, the listener, too. When you look at the enormous hurdles Ben-Yehuda faced, I mean, the language didn't even have the words he needed, let alone the social and religious battles. What does his story really tell us about the power one person's vision can have, about reviving something essential to a culture's identity?
Yeah. And maybe thinking about our own lives, our own cultures. Is there a language, a tradition, maybe something else entirely that feels particularly vibrant to you? Or perhaps something you feel needs that same kind of, well, passionate dedication he showed?
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Free Walk TLV.
Free Walk TLV.
Discover Tel Aviv like a
local.